Hey there, in today's video I'm talking about seeking validation from others, the codependent trap. And in this video I'm going to talk about the difference between internal versus external validation and how you can start to build self-esteem by validating yourself instead of always relying on outside sources. Now, if you're new here, my name is Michelle. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. If you relate to codependency or self-doubt, you probably are relying more on external validation at this point rather than internal, and there's reasons for that. Because when we grow up in dysfunctional families where our own experience isn't validated, we learn not to trust ourselves. And what this looks like is if you grew up with an alcoholic parent or a rageful sibling or a depressed parent, and those experiences weren't validated as being true, you learn to doubt yourself. You learn to go, wow, I don't understand. I see my dad drinking every night, but everybody's ignoring it. What happens is that makes you feel crazy, like your reality is wrong. And that sets you up to need external validation in adulthood because you can't trust what you think and feel. You have to have some other experience being validated outside of you versus being able to trust yourself. Validation is basically when we are affirming our own truth as valid. That's basically what validation is that you can trust how you think and how you feel in any situation. But when you can't do that and you can't give yourself that healthy sense of self, because validation is also about self-esteem. When we can validate ourselves, we can love ourselves for exactly who we are in that moment. Now, what codependents tend to do is they tend to not have a strong sense of self, so they really look to others to validate themselves, especially in their relationships. So if you're codependent, you might rely on your marital status to feel good about yourself, or how well or accomplished your kids are, or whether or not you're in a relationship. All of those things can determine how you feel about yourself. The problem is that those things we can't control. Their relationships end. Kids have problems. So when we rely on outside sources, especially other people, it tends not to work out long term because your self-esteem literally changes when they change, and we don't want that. Other types of external sources are if you put all of your worth into your job or your accomplishments or how much you give to other people. Because again, those are external sources. And if I change jobs or if I say no to a volunteer position because I'm too burnt out or I'm ill, that doesn't define me. But if I'm relying too much on external sources, it does. And it makes it really, really hard to let go of those external sources because they become a part of who I am. Versus when we talk about internal validation, that's different. That's building your self-esteem and your validation for who you are from the inside. And that's a lot healthier. Now, internal validation is really when you can pat yourself on the back when you do something well, or you can acknowledge your strengths and your weaknesses as being part of who you are. You can validate your truth even when somebody disagrees with it. So for instance, a good example for me was in my 20s, I had to ask everybody their opinion about something if I had an issue because I didn't trust myself. Now, fast forward till today, I can have a discussion with a friend or my husband about something that I'm struggling with. And if they have a different opinion, that doesn't change my truth. I can incorporate some of their feedback if I feel like it makes sense. But if it doesn't, I can politely say, thanks so much for the support, and this is still how I feel. So I can stay in the truth of who I am and what I think in that moment. That's what internal validation gives you. Because if you can start to rely on things like who you are, your likes, your dislikes, your strengths, your weaknesses, all of those are part of who you are. And being able to trust your intuition is another part of having internal validation. Because when you trust that something doesn't feel right, that's a really good guidepost. You're going to be able to utilize that wisdom in situations and keep yourself safe, or to determine whether or not you need to leave a relationship. Going from external to internal validation is really important. And part of how you do that is you start to take the focus off of the outside sources and start catching yourself when you're looking for outside validation, because that's the first step in changing, is to notice, oh wow, right now I'm really wanting someone else to validate me. If you need someone to validate your experience occasionally, that's fine. That's totally human. I still need that. The difference is I don't need that all the time. And if I have a different opinion from what someone else is telling me, I can still hold in my truth. As we learn to honor our own experience and our own reality, you start to feel happier. You start to trust yourself in a relationship and trust that your perceptions are correct for you. Because we're all struggling in life on occasion to figure things out and to try to live a happier life. But if you can start to build that self-esteem and that self-worth by slowly moving from external validation to internal validation, that's going to be really healthy. Now, the next step I want you to do is I want you to go watch my video on how to love yourself more, because part of doing this work is being able to really start to cultivate that self-esteem and that self-love. And that's what I want for you. Thanks so much. Bye.